In exactly 87 days, the man who may have killed Madeleine McCann could walk free forever. Let that sink in for a moment. 87 days. That's how long international investigators have to build a case against Christian Bruckner, a German predator whose digital footprint reads like something from your darkest nightmares. Have you ever felt that sinking feeling when justice seems just out of reach? When you know in your gut that the guilty are about to slip through the cracks of a broken system? Well, that's exactly what's happening right now in one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries of our time. Do you remember where you were when 3-year-old Madeleine McCann vanished from that Portuguese resort in 2007? I'll bet you do. Because some stories, some tragedies, they don't just make headlines. They carve themselves into our collective memory and refuse to let go. For 18 years, this case has tortured investigators, devastated a family, and captivated the world. 18 years of false leads, shattered hopes, and mounting frustration. But here's what's absolutely mind-blowing and terrifying about where we stand today. Have you ever wondered what happens when the perfect crime meets imperfect timing? When mountains of evidence finally surface, but bureaucracy and legal technicalities threaten to let a monster escape? That's our reality right now. Christian Bruckner, a convicted rapist with a history that would make your skin crawl, sits in a German prison cell. He's scheduled for release on September 17, and unless prosecutors can build an airtight case in the next 87 days, he could disappear forever, potentially to a country with no extradition treaty. But what if I told you that hidden beneath a dead dog in an abandoned German factory, investigators found evidence so disturbing, so comprehensive, that it could finally solve one of the world's most haunting mysteries? What if I told you they discovered 80 gigabytes of pure evil, detailed abduction fantasies, chemical formulas for rendering victims unconscious, and digital breadcrumbs that place this predator at the exact location where Madeleine disappeared? What if I told you that among his possessions, they found children's swimwear, toys, and a handwritten confession that will make your blood run cold? The clock is ticking, not just for Madeleine's family, who have endured nearly 2 decades of anguish, not just for the investigators who've dedicated their careers to this case, but for all of us who believe that justice delayed shouldn't mean justice denied. This isn't just another true crime story. This is a race against time, where every day matters, every piece of evidence counts, and every person who cares about justice has a role to play. If you want to see justice served, if you believe that predators shouldn't walk free on technicalities, then smash that like button right now, and let's dive into evidence that will shock you to your core. Because today, we're going to explore the breakthrough that could finally answer the question that has haunted the world for 18 years. What really happened to Madeleine McCann? And why the answer might determine whether a monster walks free in exactly 87 days. The truth is more disturbing than you can imagine, but it's also closer than it's ever been. May 3rd, 2007. Praia da Luz, Portugal. A picture-perfect resort town where British families come to create memories that should last a lifetime. The McCann family was living that dream. Kate and Jerry, both respected doctors, were enjoying a well-deserved vacation with their 3 young children, twins Sean and Emily, barely 2 years old, and their precious daughter Madeleine, just 3. That evening started like any other holiday night. The adults enjoyed dinner at a tapas restaurant just 120 meters from their ground floor apartment. They had a system, taking turns to check on the sleeping children every 20 to 30 minutes. It seemed safe. It seemed normal. It seemed like any other family vacation. At 10 p.m., Kate McCann walked back to apartment 5A for what should have been a routine check. But when she pushed open the bedroom door, her world collapsed. Madeleine's bed was empty. In that single moment, paradise became hell. The vacation photos that should have captured joy would instead mark the last time this family would ever be whole. But here's what made Madeleine's disappearance different from the thousands of missing children cases that sadly occur every year. Within hours, her story had captured global attention. Her face, those distinctive eye markings, that innocent smile, became instantly recognizable across continents. The response was unprecedented. Portuguese police launched a massive investigation. British authorities deployed their own teams. The media descended like a hurricane. Celebrity appeals flooded television screens. Social media campaigns spread her image to millions. The world had adopted Madeleine McCann. But weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. Despite the largest missing person investigation in modern history, despite the millions of pounds spent, despite the countless hours of detective work, nothing, nobody, no definitive proof of what happened. No closure for a family trapped in an endless nightmare. The case became a cruel paradox, the most famous missing child in the world. Yet her fate remained completely unknown. By 2020, 13 years had passed. The investigation had explored hundreds of potential suspects. It had followed leads across multiple continents. It had generated more conspiracy theories than facts. The trail seemed not just cold, it seemed frozen solid. Kate and Jerry McCann, now in their 50s, had aged decades in those 13 years, yet they never stopped hoping, never stopped believing that somewhere, somehow, the truth would emerge. And then everything changed. Because sometimes, justice doesn't follow our timeline. Sometimes the truth stays hidden until technology catches up with evil. Sometimes predators get comfortable, thinking they've beaten the system, and that's exactly when they make the mistakes that bring them down. The breakthrough that was about to shake the Madeleine McCann case to its core didn't come from a witness finally speaking up. It didn't come from a deathbed confession or a dramatic courtroom revelation. It came from a dead dog and an abandoned factory in Germany. But first, we need to meet the monster who was hiding in plain sight all along. June 2020. After 13 years of silence, German prosecutors made an announcement that sent shockwaves around the world. They had identified their prime suspect in the Madeleine McCann case. His name was Christian Bruckner, and his story reads like a catalogue of human evil. Born in Germany in the 1970s, Bruckner had been a drifter, a predator who moved between countries like a shadow, leaving a trail of victims and shattered lives in his wake. But it wasn't just his mobility that made him dangerous. It was his ability to blend in, to appear normal while harboring the darkest impulses imaginable. By 2020, Bruckner was already serving time in a German prison for a crime that would prove eerily significant: the 2005 rape of a 72-year-old American tourist in Praia da Luz, Portugal. Yes, you heard that correctly. The exact same resort town where Madeleine McCann would disappear 2 years later. But that conviction was just the tip of the iceberg. Bruckner's criminal record read like a horror novel: multiple sexual offenses against children, drug trafficking, burglary, theft. This wasn't a man who had made a few bad choices. This was a career predator who had spent decades perfecting his craft. Here's what made investigators' blood run cold. Bruckner hadn't just visited Praia da Luz occasionally. He had lived in the Algarve region, on and off, for years. He knew the area intimately. He understood the patterns of tourists, the blind spots in security, the perfect locations for crimes that might never be solved. Phone records placed him in the vicinity of the Ocean Club Resort on the night of May 3, 2007. Cell tower data showed his phone moving through the area around the time Madeleine disappeared. CCTV footage from nearby locations captured vehicles matching descriptions of cars he had access to. But perhaps most chilling was his behavior after Madeleine's disappearance. While the world searched frantically for a missing 3-year-old, Bruckner continued his pattern of criminal activity, as if nothing had happened. He moved between Portugal and Germany. He committed more offenses. He lived his life while a family was destroyed and a global community mourned. The more investigators dug into Bruckner's background, the more the pieces seemed to fit. He had a documented obsession with young children. He had the criminal skills to plan and execute an abduction. He had the geographic knowledge to disappear without a trace. And most importantly, he had been in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. But in 2020, all authorities had was circumstantial evidence. Phone records and geographic proximity don't prove murder. Criminal history doesn't equal guilt in a specific case. They knew they had the right man. They could feel it in their bones. But knowing and proving are two very different things in a court of law. That's when the investigation took a turn that even seasoned detectives found hard to believe. Because while prosecutors were building their case against Bruckner, a team of German investigators was about to make a discovery that would change everything. They were going to find evidence so detailed, so comprehensive, so absolutely damning, that it would provide a window into the mind of a predator who thought he was untouchable. The evidence gets even more disturbing. But first, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because this story has twists you won't believe, and when the final verdict comes down in the next few months, you'll want to be the first to know. This is more than just a true crime story. This is a masterclass in how patterns of behavior, when properly analyzed, can reveal the truth, even decades later. It's a reminder that predators often return to familiar hunting grounds, and that their past crimes can provide a roadmap to their future victims. But most importantly, it's proof that sometimes justice moves slowly, but it never stops moving. Because what investigators were about to discover in an abandoned German factory would make even hardened detectives question how deep human evil can go. Neuwergersleben, Germany, an abandoned factory that looked like any other derelict building scattered across former East Germany. Broken windows, crumbling walls, weeds growing through cracks in the concrete. The kind of place most people would drive past without a second thought. But this wasn't just any abandoned building. This was one of Christian Bruckner's former properties. And buried beneath years of neglect and decay, investigators were about to uncover a digital nightmare that would redefine our understanding of modern evil. The first clue came from an unlikely source, the remains of Bruckner's deceased dog. While searching the property, investigators noticed something unusual about the burial site. The ground had been disturbed more extensively than necessary for a simple pet burial. When they excavated further, they found it, an 80-gigabyte hard drive, carefully wrapped in plastic, along with several USB drives containing additional data. Bruckner had literally buried his digital secrets with his dead dog, thinking they would never be discovered. What investigators found on those drives will haunt them for the rest of their careers. 80 gigabytes of child abuse images, hundreds of explicit Skype conversations with other pedophiles around the world. But perhaps most chilling were the detailed written documents, step-by-step guides for abducting children. One document, written in Bruckner's own hand, described the use of ether and chloroform to render victims unconscious. Another detailed a fantasy scenario involving the abduction of a mother and child near a preschool, with Bruckner narrating every step of the process in graphic, methodical detail. But the digital evidence provided more than just insight into Bruckner's twisted mind. The metadata from his files, the digital fingerprints that record when and where data was created or accessed, told a story that investigators could barely believe. Analysis showed that Bruckner had accessed these files from locations throughout Portugal, including areas near the Array Dam, a remote reservoir that police would later search extensively in connection with Madeleine's disappearance. The timestamps revealed that he had been viewing and updating his abduction fantasies both before and after May 3rd. This wasn't just evidence of criminal intent. This was a detailed manual written by a predator who had clearly moved beyond fantasy into reality. But the digital nightmare was only the beginning. Searches of Bruckner's various properties across Germany and Portugal revealed a collection of physical evidence that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. At the abandoned factory, investigators found children's clothing that had no business being there. Swimwear, shoes, toys, items that seemed carefully preserved, almost like trophies, in a man with no children of his own, no legitimate reason for possessing such items. Their presence told a story that investigators didn't want to contemplate. Hidden in a concealed compartment, they discovered unlicensed firearms and ammunition. A suitcase contained photographs of young girls along with a list of phone numbers that investigators are still analyzing. These weren't random possessions. They were the tools and records of someone who had turned predation into a systematic operation. Perhaps most significantly, when investigators examined a vehicle Bruckner had used around the time of Madeleine's disappearance, they found traces of chemicals suspected to be chloroform or ether, exactly the substances described in his digital abduction manuals. Tragically, these chemical traces were destroyed before they could be properly analyzed, a forensic failure that would later fuel criticism of the investigation. But their presence, combined with the detailed instructions found on his hard drives, created a clear picture of a predator who had both the knowledge and the means to render a young victim unconscious. Each piece of physical evidence, when viewed in isolation, might seem circumstantial, but together, they formed a pattern that experienced investigators recognized immediately. The signature of a predator who had moved far beyond fantasy into systematic, planned criminal activity. In 2021, A documentary titled Madeleine McCann, Inside the Secret Evidence, revealed perhaps the most chilling discovery of all, what appeared to be Bruckner's own words describing Madeleine's murder. The evidence came from an unexpected source, a routine insurance document from a festival in Spain in 2008. Bruckner had been required to sign the document in the presence of witnesses, and according to multiple accounts during the signing process, he made a statement that froze everyone present. Speaking in a mocking, casual tone, he allegedly said, "She didn't scream." The context was unmistakably about Madeleine McCann. The festival was taking place during a period when the case dominated international headlines. When questioned by witnesses about what he meant, Bruckner reportedly laughed and walked away. But this wasn't the only written evidence of Bruckner's connection to the case. Investigators also discovered a handwritten letter in which Bruckner directly referenced the police investigation into Madeleine's disappearance. In the letter, he ridiculed investigators' efforts to connect him to the case, writing with apparent confidence that they had no physical evidence linking him to Madeleine. The tone was mocking, dismissive, the words of someone who believed he had committed the perfect crime. Reading these documents, investigators realized they weren't just dealing with a predator who had acted on impulse. They were confronting someone who had planned carefully, executed methodically, and then spent years gloating about his success. The evidence was overwhelming in its scope and terrifying in its implications. Digital files, physical artifacts, and written confessions had created a comprehensive portrait of guilt that seemed impossible to refute. But in the legal system, impossible to refute and admissible in court are two very different standards. And with every day that passed, time was running out to transform this mountain of evidence into a case that could stand up in court. Because Bruckner's release date was approaching fast, and if prosecutors couldn't act soon, all of this evidence might not matter at all. September 17, 2025. Mark that date in your mind, because it could be the day justice dies in the Madeleine McCann case. That's when Christian Bruckner is scheduled to walk out of his German prison cell, a free man, having completed his sentence for the 205 rape conviction. And unless prosecutors can file new charges before that date, he could disappear forever. Think about that for a moment. A man with 80 gigabytes of child abuse material, detailed abduction manuals, and what appears to be a confession to killing Madeleine McCann, could simply walk away because of legal technicalities and bureaucratic timelines. Right now, as you're watching this video, prosecutors in Germany are working around the clock in what they're calling a race against time. Every piece of evidence discovered over the past 5 years must be analyzed, verified, and prepared for court presentation. Every digital file must be authenticated. Every physical artifact must be forensically linked to the case. But here's what makes this race even more desperate. Bruckner isn't just planning to serve his time and retire quietly to a small German town. Intelligence suggests he has been making preparations to flee to a country without an extradition treaty, somewhere he could live out his days beyond the reach of international law enforcement. The German legal system, known worldwide for its thoroughness and precision, is now working against itself. The same standards that protect innocent defendants are threatening to let a monster escape justice. Hans Christian Walters, the German prosecutor leading the case, has been unusually candid about the pressure his team faces. In recent interviews, he's acknowledged that they know Bruckner killed Madeleine McCann, but knowing and proving remain frustratingly separate concepts. Meanwhile, the investigation has intensified to levels not seen since the immediate aftermath of Madeleine's disappearance. In May 2025, just months before Bruckner's scheduled release, German and Portuguese authorities launched their most sophisticated search operation yet. Using ground-penetrating radar, advanced soil analysis and targeted excavations, teams scoured areas near Praia da Luz, where Bruckner was known to have spent time. The technology available today is light years beyond what investigators had access to in 2007, and every buried fragment, every trace of DNA, every microscopic clue, could be the breakthrough that seals the case. The searches have yielded fragments of material that are currently undergoing forensic analysis in laboratories across Europe. While authorities haven't revealed specific details, sources close to the investigation suggest that some findings are promising, though whether they're promising enough to build a court case remains unclear. Adding another layer of urgency to this legal thriller is the involvement of a mysterious benefactor, someone and authorities won't say who, has offered to pay outstanding fines that could potentially accelerate Bruckner's release date. It's like something out of a crime novel, an unknown party trying to help a suspected child killer escape justice. The UK's involvement, through Operation Grange, has added international complexity to the time pressure. British authorities have invested over £13 million in the Madeleine McCann investigation since 2011, making it one of the most expensive missing person cases in history. The political pressure to show results from that investment is enormous. Detective Chief Inspector Mark Cranwell, who currently leads Operation Grange, has been diplomatically supportive of the German prosecution efforts, while acknowledging the frustration of having to work within multiple legal systems with different standards and timelines. But perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of this race against time is its impact on Kate and Gerry McCann. For nearly 18 years they've lived with the agonizing uncertainty of not knowing their daughter's fate. Now they face the possibility that the man who may have killed Madeleine could escape justice simply because bureaucracy moves slower than evil. In recent statements, the McCann family has expressed cautious optimism about the evidence against Bruckner, while acknowledging their terror that he might walk free. Kate McCann has spoken about the cruel irony of finally having answers so close, yet potentially so far away. Share this video right now, because the world needs to know about this race against time. International pressure has played a crucial role in keeping this case alive for 18 years, and it may be the only thing that prevents a monster from escaping justice. But time is running out, and every day brings us closer to a decision point that will define whether justice delayed has become justice denied. The next few months will determine everything. But here's where this story gets complicated, because not everyone believes Christian Bruckner is guilty of killing Madeleine McCann. Despite the mountain of evidence we've discussed, critics argue that prosecutors are building a case on circumstantial evidence and digital artifacts that, while disturbing, don't definitively prove murder. They point to several concerning gaps in the investigation that raise legitimate questions about the rush to judgment. First, there's the issue of the destroyed chemical evidence. Remember those traces of chloroform or ether found in Bruckner's vehicle? They were destroyed before proper testing could be completed. A forensic failure that defense attorneys will undoubtedly exploit in any future trial. In a case where every piece of evidence matters, losing potentially crucial physical proof is devastating. Legal experts have also questioned the reliability of the confession evidence. The alleged statement, "She didn't scream," was made at a festival in Spain, witnessed by civilians rather than law enforcement. There's no official recording, no formal documentation, just the testimony of bystanders who may have misheard or misinterpreted what was said. Some criminologists argue that the focus on Bruckner has blinded investigators to other possibilities. They suggest that Madeleine's disappearance could have been part of a larger human trafficking operation in the Algarve region, with Bruckner being either a scapegoat or just one member of a larger criminal network. These theories point to the sophisticated nature of the crime, how someone could abduct a child from a resort apartment without leaving trace evidence, without being spotted by multiple witness checks, and without any physical evidence being discovered despite extensive searches. There's also the uncomfortable reality that convicting someone based heavily on digital evidence sets a concerning legal precedent. While Bruckner's hard drives contained horrific material, possession of child abuse images and written fantasies, while criminal, don't automatically prove involvement in a specific murder case. Defense attorneys argue that the metadata placing Bruckner near significant locations could be explained by his legitimate activities in the region where he lived. His presence at the Arade Dam, for instance, could be unrelated to any criminal activity involving Madeleine McCann. Perhaps most troubling for prosecutors is the time gap. 17 years passed between Madeleine's disappearance and the discovery of the key evidence against Bruckner. Memory fades, physical evidence degrades, and witness accounts become less reliable with each passing year. Some legal observers worry that the intense public and political pressure to solve this case may be pushing prosecutors to charge Bruckner prematurely, risking a failed prosecution that could permanently close the door on finding Madeleine's real killer. These concerns reflect the fundamental challenge of any high-profile cold case: balancing the desire for justice with the requirement for absolute proof. In a legal system built on innocent till proven guilty, Even mountains of disturbing evidence must meet rigid standards of admissibility and relevance. The question isn't whether Christian Bruckner is a dangerous predator. His conviction record proves that. The question is whether the evidence specifically ties him to Madeleine McCann's disappearance in a way that can withstand the scrutiny of a criminal trial. So where does this leave us? 87 days and counting until a decision that could define justice for an entire generation. As I record this video, forensic laboratories across Europe are working overtime to analyze every fragment of evidence collected from recent searches. Digital experts are combing through Bruckner's files for any detail that might have been missed. Legal teams are preparing arguments that could determine whether nearly 2 decades of investigation culminate in justice or frustration. But this case has become about more than just solving one crime. However heartbreaking, it's become a test of whether our legal systems can adapt to the realities of modern criminal investigation, whether international cooperation can overcome bureaucratic obstacles, whether justice can prevail when evil thinks it has beaten the system. For Kate and Jerry McCann, now in their mid-50s, these next few months represent either the end of an 18-year nightmare or the beginning of a new kind of torture, knowing who likely killed their daughter, but being unable to prove it in court. The broader implications extend far beyond one family's tragedy. There are thousands of cold cases around the world where new technology could unlock old secrets. The precedent set by the Madeleine McCann investigation will influence how authorities approach historical crimes for years to come. If Bruckner walks free on September 17th, it won't just be a failure of justice, it will be a signal to predators everywhere that if you can stay ahead of the evidence long enough, you can literally get away with murder. But if prosecutors succeed in building a case that survives legal scrutiny, it will prove that no crime is ever truly forgotten, no victim is ever truly abandoned, and no predator is ever truly safe from the long arm of justice. The technology that uncovered Bruckner's digital secrets didn't exist in 2007. The forensic techniques being used in current searches weren't available during the original investigation. This case proves that cold doesn't mean closed, it just means waiting for the right tools to unlock the truth. There's a lesson here that extends far beyond true crime. Persistence in the face of seemingly impossible odds can literally move mountains. The McCann family never stopped believing. Investigators never stopped searching. The public never stopped caring, and that collective refusal to give up may finally deliver the justice that seemed impossibly out of reach. But we also have a role to play in the next 87 days. International attention has kept this case alive when it could have been forgotten. Public pressure has maintained funding when investigations could have been closed. Media coverage has prevented evidence from being buried when bureaucracy could have prevailed. Subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell right now, because when the final verdict comes down, whether it's charges filed against Bruckner or his release into the shadows, you'll want to be among the first to know. Share this video with everyone who believes that predators shouldn't escape justice on technicalities. Comment below with your thoughts on whether Bruckner is guilty or whether prosecutors are rushing to judgment. Because somewhere out there, the truth about what happened to Madeleine McCann on May 3, 2007 is waiting to be revealed, and it might happen in the next 87 days. Justice for Madeleine isn't just about solving one case. It's about proving that evil never really wins. It just sometimes has to wait longer to lose. The countdown continues, and the whole world is watching.